Welcome to another episode of Morning Mojo with me, your host, Shane Solomon. Joining me on the sofa today, we have Richard Warburton. Pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm telling you now, we're going to get straight into this. Public speaking. Now, where did that start for you? How did you come into this environment?
For me, public speaking didn't actually start with public speaking. It started with a corporate job that I was in. I'm a data analyst and data scientist by training.
Yes.
And a lot of that work involves helping people understand really complex things and seeing things differently. So there was always a communication element in there for me. But there's one event that really led me to go down the route of actually practicing and learning about public speaking. And that was a big presentation. I'd been given a great opportunity to present to the board and the exec leadership team of a fairly sizable part of an organization. And it was rare they were in one place together. And to get this opportunity, it could have potentially been career defining. I'd got half an hour slot. I'd spent weeks preparing, well, not weeks, but days preparing the presentation. I got 25 minutes of material, got 5 minutes for Q&A. I knew where I needed people to be at the end of the presentation. And on the day of the presentation, my time slot came, went, and then someone comes out and goes, "Can you just give us the 5-minute version?" So everything I'd prepared went out the window, and I didn't do a great job of that presentation. I messed it up. And the knock-on effect of that for me was the great career-defining opportunity I had suddenly became career-defining for the wrong reasons. So future opportunities passed me by. And I had a choice. I could either learn from this. I could either let it get to me and drag me down. And I chose to learn from it. And I went off and learned about public speaking. I learned how to define a presentation and write a presentation that you can deliver in 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 5 minutes at short notice, making sure you know the key message you need to land. And I found a safe space to practice public speaking as well. And that was about 10 years ago. And here I am today.
So, and where do you go for that? Do you go to university? Do you go to the books? Do you go to the internet? Where do you go? Where do you learn?
There's plenty of places you can go to learn. So first of all, just general conversations with people in the street can be classed as public speaking and gets your mind ready for those kind of impromptu conversations you have. For me, I found an organization called Southwest Speakers, an organization I've still am involved with today. And that gives people this platform to learn and a safe space to practice. And I'm also starting to spin up training courses that help professional audiences and networkers and people who want to speak in public on a more regular basis. I'm starting to spin those courses up as well through Vocate Futures.
Because it's not a natural skill, let's be honest.
Far from it.
If you remember back in school, if you were asked to talk in assembly and things like that, I think that fear of God of all of us went straight up us and thinking, my goodness me, how do I deal with this? And it doesn't get any easier. And, I was very lucky that I had a singing career from the age of 18. And very quickly I had to learn to be confident singing in front of people. But after that, I went into the business arena and I attended my first business networking event with just 20 people around a table, with a chairperson who stood up and introduced me to stand up and give a 60-second pitch.
Yeah.
And I swear I was shaking like you wouldn't believe. And, I'd been used to singing on stage, but the environment within the business world was so much more. So what can people do today, in your opinion, just to get started, just to kind of calm those nerves a little bit and build some confidence?
Some great observations and great questions there. And going right back to the start of what you said there, it is not a natural skill. No one, no matter how charismatic the Obamas, either Michelle or Barack Obama, the great speakers, the Churchills of this world, they are not born as natural orators. They've learned that skill and it's practiced. And there are some people fortunate in this world to have that training from a young age. And unfortunately, it is the minority. So for the vast majority of the public, our first experiences of public speaking normally aren't overly positive. You spoke about standing up in front of your school. That is quite a common one. People mess a presentation up in front of a class and they just remember the jeers and the heckles, and it's really not a positive environment to learn that skill. And people carry that experience with them for the rest of their lives.
True.
So it's not a natural skill, but we can practice. We can find safe spaces to learn the skill. We can actively want to step out of our comfort zones and find opportunities to speak. And there's quite a few out there. If you look at the networking events, you nearly always get an opportunity to stand up and say who you are. Quite a few of them will give you the opportunity to do a short 5-10 minute pitch at them as well. And even then, you can go past there and find paid for speaking slots as well, which give you a much longer and much larger platform to talk from. So finding a platform to practice and learning about how to actually craft a speech and how to find the message, the one message you want to land, and building your entire narrative around that to actually bring the audience to that conclusion is something you can learn and you can practice.
Now, it might seem obvious for the listener
Mhm.
listening to this now. Why would they want to do public speaking?
Because quite simply, it is an essential skill for life. And I have a slightly different definition of public speaking. Anytime you're actually speaking to anyone, your family, your friends, your colleagues, you are speaking in public. So, actually, the ability to communicate and speak to people is an essential skill. You need to be able to communicate your messages. So, if you're a manager of people, you need to be able to clearly say what it is you would like people to do. If you are a parent, you need to not only communicate to children and family, you also need to listen. You also need to be empathetic as well. And these are all skills that you can learn by learning about public speaking and actually stepping out of your comfort zone to speak in public. So there are many reasons. We could probably spend an entire 40, 50-minute podcast just talking about the reasons, but there are
Sure.
many.
Now, let's talk about networking for
Mm,
just a moment and how important that is
mm,
in business life, certainly as a business owner.
yes.
Let's talk about that for a minute. How important do you think it is? And then ultimately, that skill of public speaking comes
Mm,
into it.
yes. So how important
Mm,
is networking? In a one word answer, incredibly. For me, your professional network is your support network.
mm,
It's akin to your professional friends and family. It's the people you turn to for help, support, for guidance, for sanity checking ideas, and
mm.
also just to socialize and actually just catch up with people and see how they are. That support network, as it is in day to day life, is vital. And if you don't have that in place, you can be quite vulnerable. You can be very constrained by a few individuals in an environment. So, for me personally, having a broad, diverse network is incredibly important because it's the people you go to for help when you need it the most.
Sure. I like that. Motivations. This show
Mm,
is all about
mm,
motivating people, inspiring
yeah.
people on their morning
Mm,
commute or their wake up morning
mm.
kind of routine. What motivates you, Richard? What kind of sets you off for the day? What's driving you?
Good question. Um, Making a difference really matters to me. And it's something I actually realized quite late in life. And it goes right back. If I think about this, I can trace it right back to my early days as a data analyst and data scientist. But actually helping people see the world differently, helping them have a positive impact, is something that really matters to me. And it took me a long time to find the words to actually describe that and actually articulate it as making a difference. But as I move out of data science and data analytics and into the skills training world, it's still the same. I still get the opportunity to help people to make a difference and know that someone is in a better place because I've been able to help them. So making a difference.
That's a powerful one. It's
Mm,
all about the why,
yeah.
and this is why I keep saying in the
Mm,
program, if your why is not strong enough to make you cry,
mm,
it's not big enough.
yeah.
You've got to really
Yeah.
have that purpose there, I think.
Indeed. Yeah.
Um, so what about speakers and leaders that have brought out
Mm.
books or quotes that might inspire you? Is there anything that stands out there at all?
So there is a quote,
Hmm.
and it's hard to say whether it's a quote or whether it's a principle. And it's actually from a book that you've had and discussed here before. It's the Four Agreements.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And there is one agreement in there for me that really resonates, and that is be impeccable with your words. Now, I have to be honest, I don't totally agree with the reasoning that the author uses in that book,
Okay.
but the output and the agreement I totally agree with the sentiment. Be impeccable with your words. And there's two reasons for this. So, first of all, one, we are the stories we tell ourselves. The dialogue we choose to describe events and remember events in our minds influences how we feel about things. And we can use derogatory language towards ourselves. And going back to the example of talking in school, you can remember that as a negative experience.
Sure.
Or you can choose to use positive, encouraging language. It was your first public speaking experience, and you're going to learn from there. So, being kind with the words to yourself and being impeccable with the dialogue you use towards yourself is vitally important. But it also goes further than that because it involves being impeccable with your words to others. And words are powerful. And you could, in a fit of rage, say 2 or 3 words to someone that you don't mean, completely out of context, but they then carry that at the back of their mind for weeks, months, even years in some cases. So the quote for me that really, really resonates and is quite important is be impeccable with your words.
I like that. I like that.
Mm.
So where can people follow you then? Where are you big online? Are you big with Instagram, LinkedIn? Which one's the best for you?
So primarily on LinkedIn. If you search for Vocate Futures on LinkedIn, you will find me.
Yes.
You can also find me on the web. I am at vocate.work, although that will soon be changing for skills2success.co.uk.
Okay.
And you can also find the courses that I offer via the Your Partnerships Academy online.
Of course, we have that mutual thing together there with Your Partnerships. In fact, a lot of our guests have come from that network, of course. Just going back to the kind of speaker side of things, for those listening and watching to this podcast, what makes a speaker and a speech engaging? What kind of tips can we leave there for the viewers?
It's a really good question.
I know it's a big one, but
it's a big one. It's an important question. And I think for me, there's 3 things that really make a speech engaging. First of all, you need a hook. You need something that grabs the audience's attention. Now, that could be a fact, it could be an anecdote, or it could be a really colourful description of a situation. But it needs that hook to get the audience's attention. And what that hook does is it brings everyone onto the same place and it starts them from the same place. And that means that the second most important thing is the journey. A good speaker, an engaging speech will take the audience on a journey. And having hooked them and brought them to a common starting place, you can take them step by step on this journey. And only little steps. You don't want the audience to feel uncomfortable. But by the time you've taken 10 big steps, you're a long way away from that starting point. And then a skillful speaker will use that journey to build up to the conclusion. And the conclusion has to leave the audience in a better place. So something they can learn, something they can take away, something that helps them see the world differently, or in my case, can help make a difference. It has to leave the audience in a better place. So for me, 3 core components of an engaging speech: you hook the audience, you take them on a journey, and you leave them in a better place.
I like that. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given, Richard? Not necessarily just within the public speaking arena, but anywhere in your life.
There's I think there's 2 things that spring to mind. A good friend once described herself as a recovering perfectionist. And while it's not advice, it has resonated with me because I come from a background where I did always try to be perfect in everything I do. And that just saps energy and isn't always a good thing to do.
Sure.
So be a recovering perfectionist is one bit of advice. But I think the bit of advice that has resonated with me more and more as I've got older is don't sweat the small stuff. There's so much in this world that we can't control and so much that we can't influence. When small things happen, you can't let it worry you. You've just got to go with the flow and accept it has happened and not try to let it get into your mind and worm away. So don't sweat the small stuff.
Okay. And then what about a personal life lesson from something challenging that you've
Mm,
experienced in the past that you've overcome?
mm. I think this brings us full circle right back to how I ended up in public speaking, because having the opportunity to present at board level and exec board level to this department, it would have been a FTSE, if it wasn't part of a bigger company, it would have been a FTSE 250 board, was a massive career defining opportunity, and it didn't go to plan. And those situations are things you can learn from. And if you don't look at those situations and think this is a learning opportunity, they just consume your thinking, and you become bitter about the entire experience. So actually being able to go into or come out of a bad situation and think, I'm going to turn this into a positive for me, was a really, really important life lesson. And getting good from bad is something I still try to this day. There's good in nearly every situation.
Of course, and we've got to go
Mm.
through the bad as well. You
Yes.
can't
Yeah.
have the yin and the yang, right? You can't have one without the other.
Totally agree. Yeah.
To get to
Yeah.
the good, you've got to go
Mm.
through the bad. You've got to
Mm.
have the two to compare. So what next then for
Mm.
Richard? What are you working on that you're excited about over the next 12
Mm.
months?
Good question. Really, really excited about the courses that we've got going live with your partnership in a few weeks.
Mhm.
We're running both virtual and face-to-face courses, specializing in things such as public speaking, beginner's guide to networking. A colleague is also running courses on business culture as well. So they will be live in the next few weeks. I'm also spinning up a interview skills training course, which will be an on-demand training course. One of the things when you start really looking at public speaking, and something that drives a lot of members to Southwest Speakers, is they've got up and coming interviews and they don't know how to answer impromptu questions on the spot about things they should know from their life.
Sure.
I have an on-demand training course going live, hopefully in the next 4 or 5 weeks, which will cover all the knowledge and skills you need to practice, prepare, and identify relevant, compelling examples from people's history to talk about in interviews as well.
Well, there's a huge
Mm.
chance then for our
Mm.
audience to connect with you
Yes.
and glean some of this
Mm.
experience from you and your knowledge.
Mm.
And I know we mentioned LinkedIn earlier on, but the best way for people to contact you through this podcast now is it email, phone, LinkedIn?
It will be either via email or LinkedIn, both of which I'm happy to leave with you for the show notes as well.
Absolutely
Mm.
superb. And now, of course, is there anything
Mm.
else you'd like to mention about that I've not mentioned on this podcast this morning that you'd love to, you know, leave on the wonderful audience we have?
I think believe in yourself. I think particularly when you're faced with some of the situations that public speaking can put you in, you have to believe in yourself. You have to silence the little inner critic that's saying you can't do it. And you have to take that first step. And the first step is always the hardest, but you never take it unless you believe in yourself.
I believe. I believe. How many is your kind of biggest audience, would you say?
My biggest audience,
Mm.
it would have been a virtual training session to just over 450 people.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I had a publican talk to me the other day, said that he had to do this online
Mm.
thing and he was absolutely hitting himself, about doing it because
Mm.
there was going to be 400 or whatever on there,
Yeah.
like an institution of innkeepers or something like that.
Yeah.
And he chose to have the screen off so he couldn't see anybody,
Mm.
But that really is a thing, isn't it? I
Yeah.
guess people do get nervous
Mm.
about doing online presentations. So they're
Yes.
there, a bit
Yeah.
like radio, a bit like podcast.
Mm.
They're there.
Yes, you're suddenly aware of how vulnerable, and you may be in a safe environment, you may be in the studio at home, or you may be just sat at your desk,
Mm,
but you are vulnerable. You are communicating with hundreds of people, all of whom have an opinion, and that narrative you spin up in your head is, if they're going to say something, it's going to be bad. Well, what if they say something positive? What if they say something
mm,
good?
mm.
Unless you actually get up there and talk, you are never going to find out how your message resonates with an audience.
Sure, sure. Well, Richard Warburton, has been an absolute pleasure to welcome you here to the studio. Hope you've enjoyed the experience.
It has been superb. Thank you.
And data analyst turned public speaker guru. Make sure you connect with Richard if you haven't already. As always, I would like to say a massive thank you to our show producer today, Jay Kennett, mixing behind the scenes. Thank you very much indeed for you being involved in the show. Couldn't do it without you. Until next time, thank you from myself and Richard, and make sure you have the most amazing remainder of your day. Many thanks. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.